For Kappa Zeta Chapter Blue Table Talk. Tonight's focus is voting in Texas, what you need to know. I'm your mistress of ceremonies, Erica Morris. This evening, we have several local community leaders and experts on the panel. They will enlighten us on the new voting laws and rights we have as Texas residents. We have five panelists. First, we have Dr. Kazike Prince, founder and chief executive officer of Jelani Consulting LLC. Through Jelani Consulting, Dr. Prince provides executive consultation and coaching services that focus on cultural competency for individuals, teams, and organizations. Dr. Prince also serves as the senior policy advisor and education coordinator for City Austin Mayor Steve Adler. In October 2020, Dr. Prince helped launch the Central Texas Collective for Racial Equity as the interim executive director, a nonprofit association to support the ongoing efforts continued through the mayor's task office on institutional racism and systematic inequities focused on education, health and wellness, finance and banking, real estate and housing, and criminal and civil justice. He also writes and produces Equity Turned Up, a blog and podcast reflecting on a variety of equity and inclusion topics. Welcome, Dr. Prince. Next, we have Ms. Gretchen Nagy, Voter Registration Director of Travis County Tax Office. Ms. Nagy became involved in campaigns at the University of Texas during the 1984 presidential election. She has been an associate at the political consulting firm of Emery, Young and Associates in Austin for nearly 7 years. In early 2016, she joined the voter registration division as its director. She helped to increase the voters registration rate from 86.2% in February of 2016 to today's rate of 95.5%. Welcome, Ms. Nagy.
You're the Next, first talking about you.
Okay. Next on our panel is Mr. Nelson Linder, president of the NAACP of Austin. He is also the owner of Linder Insurance Agency since 2016. 2006. In 1992, he founded the controversial Garvey Allen Washington Project, an organization that combined the philosophies of Marcus Garvey, Richard Allen, and Booker T. Washington. The organization focused on self-empowerment and social justice for African Americans. In 2000, he was elected president of the Austin NAACP. He has been interviewed by the Washington Post, CNN, BET, and numerous media throughout Texas. His work on police brutality has received national recognition. Linder's 2005 role in establishing the African American Quality of Life Initiative led to the creation in Austin of the African American Resource Advisory Commission for the following year. Linder has also served as a radio talk show host on KAZI 88.7 FM, which is a show that combines music with current affairs and emphasizes local participation as the key to political empowerment. Welcome, Mr. Linder.
Thank you very much.
Fourth, we have Miss Dana DeBuvois. I'm going to say that right.
You did great. Perfect.
Wow. Dana has always been inspired by public service. Since her election as county clerk in 1986, she has devoted herself to bringing high ethical standards, effective and cost-efficient management practices, the benefits of new technology, and high-quality customer service to the office of the county clerk. The clerk's office has a wide range of responsibilities, including the conduct of elections. In 2005, she was the national recipient of the Election Center's Best Practice Award for her work in using risk analysis to implement security measures for electronic voting systems. Travis County is also recognized across the county country for its groundbreaking early voting program that is centered on customer-friendly polling locations in high-traffic retail locations. Dana has also served as an advisor and election observer for Bosnia, the People's Republic of Bangladesh, Kosovo, and the historic South Africa election that represented the end of apartheid. Welcome, Ms. Debuwa.
Thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be here.
And our last panelist, Mr. Jeffrey Trevelyan Sr., Travis County Commissioner of Precinct 1. Mr. Trevelyan Sr., was elected Travis County Commissioner of Precinct 1 on November 8, 2016, and took office on January 1st, 2017. Previously, he spent 16 years at the City of Austin as the interdepartmental team lead for the Neighborhood Enhancement Team in the Austin Code Department. He was responsible for developing protocols addressing code compliance issues within the City of Austin health, safety, and welfare codes. He has more than 30 years of experience providing management solutions in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors. During his career, he has conducted extensive operational reviews of state agencies and city departments and worked on teams producing recommendations adopted by the Texas legislature that saved the state of Texas more than $8 billion. Welcome, Mr. Trevelyan.
Thank you. It's good to be here with you all tonight.
We thank all in attendance for joining our Blue Table Talk. To the panel, thank you for coming to share your knowledge and expertise on this issue. Our moderators this evening are members of Alpha Kappa Zeta Chapter, President Mrs. Juanita Jackson, and Zeta Youth Advisor, Ms. Candace Knighton. Without further ado, I give you our moderator, Mrs. Juanita Jackson.
Good evening again, guest friends and my sisters of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated. It is an esteemed honor to be before you as your moderator for this discussion as we bring another Blue Table Talk. From Zeta's inception in 1920 at Howard University, Zeta women have rejected the status quo. Our founders dared to be different by establishing a sorority that would chart a course of action, raise the consciousness of people. Now more than 101 years, our courage continues to inspire us to take a stand against injustice and become beacons of positive change. Through our Get Exchange social action program, launched under the leadership of our past international president, Mary Bro Wright, our sisterhood has mobilized to find ways to solve problems that plague the communities we serve. In these uncertain times, we must take action. The program was designed to address the underlying issues in our communities, drive individual community engagement, empower citizens to get involved, and cultivate a culture of mutual respect in our communities. The NAACP is one of our primary contributors on criminal justice and voter education, registration, and protection efforts. Tonight's discussion has been carefully structured to enlighten you and our audience on this hot topic, voting in Texas and the proposed legislation of Senate Bill 7. As a community-conscious, action-oriented organization, it is imperative that we stay abreast of all issues that can disproportionately impact our community. Voting and voting rights can be a hard topic to address. However, this discussion is intended to focus on what we need to know to get engaged and stay engaged. As a disclaimer, this is a general discussion and comments from the individuals are their own opinion and not the opinion of the members of Travis County Commissioner's Court or the organization in which the panelists or moderators are employed. The conversation is not intended to persuade voters' opinion regarding political party or position, but to give necessary guidance and only facts about voting. Audience, as they come in, will give other guidance that you allow to put your questions in the chat, and we will address them as we continue in this conversation. So with my partner, Candace Knighton, who will also moderate with me. She will begin this discussion. And also, as a disclaimer, this meeting is being recorded.
Very well then. Greetings to everyone in attendance. I was encouraged by Ms. Jackson to give a testimony that I wanted to keep between me and her only, to everyone on the program tonight. I was honest with her in saying that I do not follow the political scene within Travis County, and I have not voted within the local elections. On a national level, I am a huge participant, but of course not on the local level. I like to say as a millennial that some things may not be as important as they should be to me. So I do want to pose a question to the panel tonight. What is your take on those within the Travis County and the city of Austin not voting in local elections, and how do you engage those voters so that can cease, if you will? Thank you.
Well, let me take a first stab at that. This is Dana Debevois, Travis County Clerk. When the city of Austin changed its election date to the November time on the ballot, we got a lot better turnout for what had been the May elections. And when the city of Austin just had an election this May, there was a lot of talk and a lot of interest in that particular election, but we only turned out at 22% total for that election in May. So the city had already done a really good thing by moving their elections to November. And I think what we saw is yet another lesson in when it's beautiful outside, people tend to go do other things besides vote. I would also point out too that there is criticism about moving municipal elections to November. You'll hear people complain about, oh my gosh, I have to go through the whole ballot to get to the municipal elections, which are required by law to follow, after the other part of the state and county and federal, state and county ballots. Well, what we are finding is that there's not really a lot of voter fatigue. Most people complete the ballot, and especially if the local communities remind voters, don't quit, stick with the ballot all the way through, and also remind people that it's not like a test. You don't have to vote on every single item if you haven't made up your mind on a particular one where you're trying to vote, or if you don't know the candidates, you can skip it. So let me start there. The idea of voter turnout, though, has really been pushed by the League of Women Voters. And they taught me a long time ago that there's a big difference between infrastructure and personal assistance or personal invitation. Government should play a role in making sure that the infrastructure supports voters being able to vote. We should be accessible. It should be public knowledge. There should be lots of ways to find out, where to go vote, and then all of our locations should be easy to get to and accessible, and on public transportation routes and fully accessible in that sense. It is inappropriate for government to spend government dollars on enticing people to come out to vote, because inevitably we are going to be in a get out the vote kind of problem area where we've perhaps overemphasized one group and underemphasized another group. So turnout is actually not the job of the county elections administrator, but making sure people have enough information is part of infrastructure.
So as you lead into that, Dana, you said something about the League of Women Voters. One of the things we noticed is that women tend to be very involved in voting. Is there a reason that we see that, or is it just innately that, I don't want you to have to answer it. I want the men to be engaged in this conversation too. But what do you think is the reason that causes women to be more involved? And any one of our gentlemen, panelists, I would like to hear your take. What do you think could be the reason we don't have male involvement in our voting elections?
It's a good question. One of you guys want to go?
I'll just say real quick. I think kind of back to the first question that was asked about millennials. I think sometimes people don't see how the issues that are going on relate to their day-to-day life, right? They don't see how voting in local elections impacts their everyday life. But in truth, local elections have more of an impact on what goes on with people's day-to-day lives than what happens on the federal level. Not to say it doesn't have any impact. I'm just saying when you think about what's going on, you think about who's your commissioner and who's the mayor and the city council members, those decisions that they make have a real direct impact. But for some reason, there's a kind of psychological disconnect. What we see on television tends to be focused on federal issues, and then in the way you're going to see more local issues is if you watch local news. Well, if you follow that, you know that a lot of people don't follow local news as much as they used to, and so there's a bit of a disconnect. But when you think about the truth is local elections have a more direct impact. And so I think it has to do with some psychology of the disconnect that people have made between what the federal elections will do and what local elections do, and maybe misunderstanding or not quite sure, knowing what the connection is, and just what comes across the screen on social media and the news and those kinds of things. And so that's part of the story, but it's an important part of the story why I think people sometimes are not as involved, particularly when we think about some men.
So maybe I'll take a stab at that one for a moment if I can. I mentor in a group called 100 Black Men, and I'm a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. So my experience was a little different. When I was growing up, my father was a principal, and at his school was a voting site. I saw community people talk about things that were important to them. What we saw as children, we worked to become as adults. They made us understand that it was important to them that we be involved. So it became important, and we got involved. The first presidential candidate I voted for was Jimmy Carter, and I'll tell you this. When city council knows that you will show up at the meeting and you will vote, city council will listen to what you have to say to them. When the county commissioners know that you're going to come and make your voice be heard, then they will listen to the things that you have to say. We have to remember that this was a sacred right that in the South, many of our grandparents and parents gave their lives for. And it's sacred because as you see what is happening all across the South now, you see that we decide, a part of what we did this last election cycle was decide who the president was going to be. And they did not like it, and they've been working to make sure that we don't have easy access. In fact, in Texas, it's going to be easier to get a gun than it is to get registered and vote. And if something is so important that somebody is trying to take it from you, then maybe we ought to think about how it is we educate people all the time. We should not wait until the last minute. We should make sure that those folks who listen to us get registered and get prepared, that they know about the League of Women Voters, that they know where they can find information about what a city council member is responsible for, the zoning authority that they have, what a county commissioner's office is responsible for. Almost 3/4 of our dollars go to running the criminal justice system. You should know that, and we should be making sure that those dollars are being used fairly and in a way that enhances and creates opportunity in the community. Because we have folks that look like us on the court, we have great diversion programs. And while we work on diversion, we also work on trying to make sure that we provide training dollars for folks when they're involved in the criminal justice system. So on the other side, maybe they'll have better access to jobs. It is important that we identify and define what political involvement truly means, and then that we encourage the folks who listen to us. One of the people that I listened to was Lillian Curley. She was one of your sorority members. She used to be a person who ran the Booker T. Washington projects. She was a community leader. Also, Ruth Davis Sauls, who was the musician at David Chapel, was also a member of your chapter. People look at you for a number of reasons. Those folks who you influence, I would encourage you to make sure that they know how important voting is to you and to our entire community.
Candace?
Yes. All right, so here's another question to the panel. What do we need to know about the proposed legislation, and what could be the potential impact on our democracy?
Mr. Nelson, you want to?
Well, let me first say this, that 2020, we had the highest voter turnout in a decade. That empowered a lot of people to change our national political landscape. And so a lot of folks were perturbed by that and actually frightened by that. As a result, you've seen a reaction to that. You're seeing now local bills here, like SB 7, that want to address things like reducing voting hours, stopping drive-through voting. You're seeing a lot of restrictive measures that will reduce access to voting. Anything that reduces access to voting is anti-democratic. But unfortunately, they feel that if less people vote, they win. So from our standpoint, we got to mobilize, first of all, let people know that even if they change these laws, we have to be so committed to voting, it doesn't affect our end result. So while these laws are going to have a major impact in terms of fear and harassment and more difficulty, we have to increase our resolve to vote anyway and make sure that we're educated and that we're mobilized and do our duties. And so that's kind of what we're saying now with SB 7, HB 6, the same mentality, but not just in Texas. This is a national phenomenon. And so sometimes you can't control the outcome of a bill based on the makeup of the House and the Senate. What you can do is ensure that you vote at a higher percentage. And back to what Danny was saying earlier, our turnout is dismal. There's no excuse for that. And let me close by saying this. Studies show in communities where you have higher turnout, you get more resources. During the storm in February, you saw the difference in East Austin infrastructure and the rest of the city. Right now, I'm in a temporary trailer because my building, suffered damage. And because of the infrastructure, it's still being repaired. So in East Austin, because of the lack of involvement in many cases, we got less resources. And as a result, we had a different quality of life. So voting locally is the key to where resources go and also creating equity in every particular zip code. So we have to make sure that voting is almost like a principle. If you don't vote in your own community, in many ways, you're allowing resources to go elsewhere. And we should think about it from that standpoint. Without votes, we have less resources. As Jeff said earlier, politicians know what communities vote the most in terms of percentage. So we should all make sure we commit to voting the highest percentage possible in every elections. Unfortunately, sometimes the ballot is not very romantic. We have to make sure we let people know if it's not romantic, it's still important. Like the last election, for example, we had a lot of propositions. And a lot of folks didn't know what they really meant. And as a result of things like Prop B, they were surprised. Mm-hmm. So that's the consequences of not having voter involvement, education, therefore less mobilization.
So on that, and I'll ask, this is, and anyone could take a stab at this, on that, with speaking about propositions, we found that was a day one, the actual election day was a Saturday. Do you find out you got a better turnout if it's a Saturday as opposed to a day of the week? And in combination to that question, how do you feel about the statement used by the GOP claiming that they're protecting the integrity of the Texas elections? What are your thoughts on that?
That's insulting. Voters are a lot smarter than that. Voters are not going to buy that at all. Let me just make a couple of general comments, please, about Senate Bill 7, or the most recent version of the two that are floating out there. In general, this bill, Senate Bill 7 and House Bill 6, were a foregone conclusion before this legislature even got started. Once the House and the Senate committees were established and the numbers were put in place of how many Democrats and how many Republicans were on each of those important committees, it was done. It was a done deal on the first day. What this Senate Bill 7 does is it targets Harris County and Travis County. It went through specifically all the problems that I had here in Travis County and all the problems that Michael Wynn had in Harris County. He wanted to send out, and the county clerk there too, he wanted to send out an application to vote by mail to everybody in the county. And I thought about doing that here too. But what happened was that the Democratic Party had already done it here. So if I had done it, I would either be duplicating what had already been done by hundreds of thousands, or I would have only been targeting people who had not already been receiving it, which would have been independents and Republicans. Neither of those was a good idea. So I did not send out applications to vote by mail. So we didn't get tagged for that one, but what we did get tagged for was the absolutely illegal behavior of poll watchers. And I fought them every step of the way, and I will do so again. But I have to tell you that this bill has page after page after page of permission for poll watchers to behave as illegally as they want to, and there is nothing that can be done about it unless you're willing to call in law enforcement and have the poll watcher dragged out. Now, that's what we did in Travis County. They behaved so badly that they qualified for a criminal offense, perjury, criminal trespass, and wearing a secret wire. You're not supposed to record, people when they're trying to vote or count ballots. And yet there she was wearing a wire. The police caught her red-handed. So all the way through what you're reading is all of this. And I'm just going to share one more story, and then I want to hear other people talk about Senate Bill 7 because I can get into the specifics of it. But basically, I am still under criminal investigation by the indicted Attorney General for so-called obstruction of poll watchers. This is very serious. These are criminal charges. I have already had to shell out $10,000 of my personal money for my defense attorney for something that is secret. One of the reasons why I haven't been able to raise money about this or really talk about it is because there's no there. There's just this secret thing going on in Ken Paxton's office that they claim they're going to put me in front of a grand jury. And so I have to be prepared for that. But if you call and ask them, they will neither confirm nor deny that there is any activity going on, an investigation into the Travis County clerk. So I haven't been able to get a reporter to talk about it. Because it doesn't exist yet. Well, what kind of Nazi regime puts its elected officials in this kind of position where I can't even talk about what's happening to me in public? This is the most public statement I have made so far, and it has gone on for so long and cost me so much money that I'm about to end my attorney's very well considered gag order on me. I'm tired of being censored. So when you read through this, I just want you to know Senate Bill 7 was written specifically for Travis County.
Well, that is so disheartening because we see the good work that has been able to be done under your leadership, especially with the voter turnout rate increasing in our community. Candace, you have a question?
Yes,
Well, if I could jump
feel free.
Jump in 1 second. If you will look up, there's a group called the American Legislative Exchange Council. ALEC is its acronym. the American Legislative Exchange Council. It is the committee that has been writing these bills, this legislation, for states all across the South. It would be important to see who they are, see how they do business. This is a movement that is being run by the Republican Party. When you look at the way legislative districts have been gerrymandered. Last session, 10 years ago, we had 4 million new people come into the state, which should have created four new congressional positions. Well, the problem is we got them, but because we had a Republican-run legislature, they made 3 of those seats Republican and 1 of those seats Democratic, because most of the people who moved here were either Latinx or African American. So you look at where the growth came, the people who were the places where they put congressional districts did not reflect the growth of the communities that brought the people here. We're going to have another redistricting battle that's coming up. The next special session will be dedicated primarily to redistricting. And we have grown significantly in population as a state, but we have now 5 congressional districts that touch Travis County, so that the people that are making decisions about people who live in Travis County, some live in Dallas, some almost live in San Antonio, some districts, one district is almost drawn to the border. So it's going to be important that we recognize who is responsible for this. Alec is responsible for a lot of this legislation, but it's also going to be important that we make our voices heard as we go into our next legislative session, and that we coordinate ourselves as organizations, as the Divine Nine, as the NAACP, as the Urban League, so that we can make our voices heard. And when we go to court, because we will have to go to court, that we are aware of the issues and maybe even prepared to testify in some instances.
If I may, can I point out that talk about HB 7 and House Bill 6. Look at the past national election. Because remember, despite being a clear winner, these folks filed frivolous lawsuits all over Pennsylvania, over Georgia, and they had no result. I mean, they were defeated. The court threw all this stuff out, but yet they advanced that same premise. And so, in summary about Senate Bill 7, it talks about integrity. I mean, they found no evidence of voter fraud. But yet these folks say this stuff and it's false, and they keep saying it and you do it. But it's important to know where it came from. This was a strategy. If you create this thing that, number one, that's voter fraud, even though you never find any, and keep telling folks who want to believe it anyway, then you can make folks vote for this kind of nonsense. I think the bigger issue is now, we need to reinstate the Voting Rights Act under John Lewis. We have to have a counterbalance legally so folks can vote and be protected. I know there's work being done to do that, but we can't just sit back. We've got to mobilize and make sure we restore order and democratic tendencies to the Voting Rights Act. That's going to be the key ultimately, because right now, in about 43 states, people are talking about frivolous voting. They're still counting votes in Arizona. Can you imagine recounting votes? This is what, almost June? And this stuff is, I mean, they're not finding any results. They can't even count the votes. It's already been certified. So that kind of nonsense is not being challenged. And we're going to have to challenge people and expose them for what they are. And these folks are trying to restrict the access to voting, because primarily you got more and more Black and brown people voting. And guess what? That presents a threat to what people see in this country. That's the other side of the coin. That's what they're really afraid of, is the Democratic Party being more diversified and therefore gaining more power in these states like Texas and other states around the country, like my home state, Georgia. That's what's driving this whole nonsense. We need stronger laws to be passed to counteract this stuff, in my opinion.
Thank you very much for your opinions and your responses. Of course, that brings me to the concern that we discussed concerning voter suppression. I would like to pose a question to the panel, how you all feel about voter suppression, even though some of you touched on that in your responses based on the last question. And also your concerns about the poll watchers' illegal and immoral behavior as it relates to voter suppression.
If I would just get in there real quickly, I know
absolutely.
Nelson and the commissioner and Dana have deeper knowledge in this space, but I want to speak to the fact that this, some people might think this is like conspiracy theory kind of stuff, but this is not a conspiracy. This is straight up intentional political will of certain entities within our country that are intentionally trying to suppress the vote, because this is about them trying to maintain or gain power and influence politically. And if we were trying to be fair, if we were trying to have a democratic system, we wouldn't be doing the things that we see coming up in our Texas legislature and across this country. So this is straight up Jim Crow 2.0 or 3.0, depending on your perspective. It's an intentional strategy, I'll call it, on the part of many Republicans to suppress the vote of primarily Black and brown people. Because if going back to the psychology, if you make it complicated, if you send the message out there that there's some insidious process going on, that somehow there's votes not being counted or there's something unfair, it makes people less likely to even want to vote, because they turn on the TV and they're like, what's all this mess? Back to the initial question, why people don't vote, because all that stuff is so crazy. I don't even know if it even has an impact on me. I just want a job. I want my taxes to be low if all possible. And so it discourages people from even wanting to participate in the process. And fundamentally, that's the impact on people and that's why you see this struggle to even get people to go out and vote sometimes. However, as Nelson said earlier, even if these things pass, I think what you're going to see is an effort like we saw in Georgia, what we saw in Arizona, and other parts of the country, trying to get people to go out and vote, really motivating people, reminding them why this is important for them to vote, switching to times where people are more likely to vote. Because like what we found in May is that folks it wasn't on their radar for whatever reason. I'm not saying that the results would have been different. What I'm saying is that people, as was said by Dana earlier, the turnout was very low in comparison. And what I would like to see is many people voting to have their voices be heard and not feel like the system is somehow being set up for you to just discourage you from participating, which is really the intention behind all this. That's not just the legislation that's going through, but it's what you see on the news and all the talk and negativity that really discourages people from even participating.
Gretchen, I want to ask you specifically, I know you work a lot with the voter registration. Do you find that there's another way, or there are additional ways that we can get people to participate in the political process or in the voter registration? What do you see as another avenue to help us be more engaged?
Well, as we discussed when I first had gotten on the call, on the session, voter registration in Travis County is the highest of any county here in the state of Texas. And a lot of it is due to our efforts that we have put forth in all communities, all ages, campuses, young people, every community, every aspect of our county. And we're also trying to assist other counties in educating them and working with them. We're doing so with Harris County, sharing many of our tools and many of our efforts in that respect. One of the things in your discussion about voter suppression, it has affected voter registration as well, or it can be. One is we cannot get online voter registration. Everybody does everything online. And the one thing you cannot do is register online. You can't do that. And that is something that we've struggled. We've tried to get legislation passed and it just does not get passed. It doesn't get a hearing. It does not get a vote on the House floor nor the Senate. So those bills are not moving. And that is something that we're really looking forward to, basically really opening the door and having accessibility to everybody. And all of us remember what they did 2 years ago when they had the non-citizen list that was provided, and they were wanting all county registrars to send out letters, in essence, challenging, questioning people's citizenship. And there was a great amount of pushback on that. And of course, that Secretary of State did not end up staying in his position due to that tactic. But it's another attack on questioning those that are registered to vote. There is a process by which individuals are vetted through the Secretary of State's office. And so to question individuals, it was really just a very underhanded, but yet another maneuver to really cast doubt on those that are registered to vote and everything. And so that's been very troubling. We, in this session, we've been very lucky so far that there are certain bills that were targeting voter registration that are not moving. They've died. Some still, of course, there's parts of bills that could be tacked on as amendments. So we're still monitoring that. But so far, the absolute attacks on voter registration has seemed to have tempered a bit, or they have the bills have not moved forward. And so that's something that we're just continuing to monitor on a daily basis, working with some associations and individuals. The one thing that it has done is it has opened up the door to have some dialogue with some offices, some state rep offices, to talk about voter registration and some of our processes, and hopefully continue the dialogue after we get through this session.
As a follow-up, just to kind of, so for our organizations like Zeta and Alpha Phi Alpha and the other Greek or letter organizations, do you see an opportunity for us to partner and to become more strategic in how we get those voter registrations out, or to target areas that are disproportionately impacted? Do you see an opportunity that could help?
Yes. We ourselves are looking to expand all of our partnerships with any and all organizations, and all of the tools that we have. We have maps of unregistered households that we can provide to organizations to work in any one set community. And so we're always looking for new ideas. We collaborated when Michael Wynn was here in Travis County. We collaborated on a number of new initiatives and everything. So those are the types of things that we're always looking for: new initiatives, new ways of expanding voter registration and being accessible.
You know, the office has been very good at setting up workshops to create deputy voter registrars. I know that several Greek organizations, Greek letter organizations, Masonic organizations, various churches have had them come to either church sites or library sites or to houses, and to actually sit down with you and show you how to register voters. I think that is a very important activity, because a lot of us have consistent access to youth, whether we're providing them scholarships, whether we're mentoring them, whether we see them at church, scholarships during the course of the year. I think that it's important for us to, again, define how important it is to influence what goes on in our communities. As we look at what is happening right now, a decision was given yesterday that came from the city that said they had a number of spaces that they wanted to create homeless camps in. Well, a majority of those spaces were east of I-35, in places that don't have the infrastructure to maintain the communities and to do all of the things that communities need currently. Those are the opportunities that we have to take to go and talk to city council and say, excuse me, but maybe if you fulfill some of the promises that you've been making since 1975 in Colony Park, maybe if you built some of the infrastructure, brought libraries, brought parks that had been promised since the 70s, then maybe there would be an opportunity to serve more people. But what we will be telling them from the county is, you send services before you send people. It doesn't take a brilliant mind to know that.
And may I add also about strategies and collaborations? Because I think there's things that we can do in Texas. We talk a lot about who's going to run for this office, that office, but who's talking to the people? You know, in the state of Georgia, they had a massive campaign to register folks and also bring folks to the poll. But also they had conversations about the importance of voting. And that made a difference because Georgia is only 30% Black. But in places like Atlanta, Savannah, Augusta, Macon, Augusta, we had massive turnout, and that made a difference. So in Texas, I would challenge people to do the same thing here. We need a massive statewide campaign to show folks the urgency of voting. That's how you're going to win this battle eventually, because we have the numbers, but the lack of participation and involvement is just unacceptable. We can ignore it and talk about it, but until we get folks to vote and understand this is their future, that's at stake. Because these laws take time to change. Without majority in the House and the Senate, we can't beat these people politically. But if you vote in high numbers, we can do that. We can change this whole time. But it's going to take a different strategy, a different effort, not just based on let's go vote, but also let's talk about the importance of voting and show you how it affects your life. That conversation to me is not taking place in Texas. And I think that's going to be the next frontier. Not just pick candidates, but tell folks, let them know why they should vote to change the state to what it needs to be.
Yeah. Candy?
Yes, I do want to pose a question to the panel about the concerns of literacy, because a lot of the rhetoric with the Senate bills and propositions, many people in my community don't know what it means. And so when you don't know what something means, how can you vote yes or no for it? Can the panel speak to that concern? And if I have to call out someone specifically, Commissioner Trevelyan.
Okay. You know that one of the things that does happen is you bring language before the city council and you bring language before the county commissioners court. And sometimes I'm afraid some of the language is brought more to confuse than it is to clarify. So I think the first thing that we do is we look at the language that is placed on the ballot, and when there are questions, there is a legal department at the city, there is a city clerk's office, there is a county attorney at the county, and we have a clerk's office as well, so that we can talk about the language itself, exactly what it means, exactly what it says. I think that these are also opportunities for us to put different types of meetings together to talk about what is on the ballot and what it will accomplish and what it won't accomplish. I think that it is important that we take our time and work through and look through voter guides like the one that is put together by the League of Women Voters. It is a nonpartisan guide, so it gives you the language. It explains what it is. It identifies people who are on both sides of it. Tells you where the candidates are on particular issues. I think that it is important that we work as teams to really talk about what the legislation or what the ordinance is going to do, and to make sure that we are questioning council in public, questioning commissioners court in public. I think, I can't guarantee that everybody's going to do the right thing all the time. But what I can guarantee is that they're going to have to do it in public, because we're going to ask them, what does this mean? Why are we doing this? Is this the best way to get it done? What does this language mean? I think that's when something comes across the commissioner's court, we ask those questions. But we need to make sure that people are listening to that. And my office is always open. If there's something that has anything to do with county business that you're concerned about, you can call my office, ask the question, and we will get you the appropriate response, either from the office or from the executive who is responsible for that function.
If I just may ask, one of the great things about the Commissioner's Office, about Nelson Linder and other folks in the community, that they are a resource. Oftentimes they're as short as a phone call away to answer questions that people may have, whether it be our churches. I think we've heard several times that our Greek-led organizations serve in this capacity, because sometimes people just don't know where to even start to ask the question. And so that's why I think it's really important to have leaders across the community who are informed, who have the relationships, who can be there to, answer those real basic questions. And I'll be honest, for me growing up, a lot of those questions sometimes were answered when I went to church. They say, hey, go talk to so-and-so about blah, 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 because we didn't know what was going on. It had nothing to do with how smart we were, or it was just, we needed someone to translate sometimes for us about what was important and what wasn't important, how to vote, because sometimes it became complicated when you got up to the ballot. And so that's why I think it's key to have key people within the community who are well informed, who are the ones who are the town criers, if you want to call them that, to really inform people. But also, as I think was made clear earlier, going to the offices of our elected officials and others within city and county government, because that's part of their job, is to help you inform and answer your questions, even if that means going down to City Hall and making your voice known and asking those same kinds of questions. And I think what you'll find, that you can get the answers that you're looking for to clarify some of the really complicated issues that are going on within our community.
So, Dana, a question for you. Does your office provide like a task force or some kind of working group that helps your with the formation of these legislative languages, or these the documents or the language that goes on to those ballots, or who's responsible for putting that together? You're still muted.
The authority for the ballot language doesn't rest with the county clerk.
Okay.
Typically, it's going to be the legal authority for, say, if this like Senate Bill 7, that language is going to come out of what the legislative budget board, the legislature has voted on to become language. It'll be incorporated into the code of the different laws that they're trying to change. And that's the language that's to be put on the ballot. And it can go through a lawsuit, a legal process to challenge it. We saw that just with Proposition B for the last City of Austin election. So there's a give and take with it. But once I receive the ballot language, it's set. Now, we do have a lot of questions that come to us asking about, well, if I vote yes, does that mean I'm for it? Or do I vote no, does that mean I'm for it? Those kinds of questions we get all the time. And I have to be very cautious about not recommending a way to vote for somebody while I'm trying to educate them about that. My very best partner in 35 years of doing elections has been the League of Women Voters. They clarify, they do really the very best job. And we do have some really good reporters in Travis County as well. Besides the League of Women Voters, we've got Community Impact. That newspaper does a great job of outlining, the issues and giving you pros and cons, but more than that, explaining what's behind it. So I really rely on reporters and a more general public that I can then refer people to, so that I don't get in trouble for trying to pitch maybe my understanding of what it is. The more people we have with credibility behind those recommendations, the better our public will accept those explanations. The Chronicle does a great job. The Statesman, their Statesman's readership is really down, and I wish that wasn't the case. But there are lots and lots of places to get good, solid information that's not a recommendation from the person who's conducting the election.
Anyone else want to tag in? Any questions?
I want to go back to, if I may, I'm sorry. Somebody else? Back to Kazike's point about organizations. Intimacy is very important. We saw that in Georgia. When people know you, they feel more comfortable talking to you. we got to make sure our organizations, our fraternities are a lot more engaged, because we have a lot more influence than we realize. Almost every election, my older members will call the office and want to discuss the ballot. And they're very well informed, but they're not informed about everything. They feel very comfortable saying, Nelson, what do you think about this? But there are very few young people that call the office about information. We have a lot of social groups in our community, all over the place. But I don't see a process where we're actually vetting the ballot, looking at the language, trying to decipher what it really means. We've had to do several lawsuits about ballot language before, and we won. But to DK's point, we have so many organizations that know each other. If you know people, they're going to more likely to trust you and show you what they don't know. Sometimes folks are embarrassed. They don't want to say they don't know. But if you know people and you're intimate with them on several layers, they will talk to you about these issues honestly. That happened in Georgia in many places. And that's why folks came out. They felt compelled to come out because they had been told to come out. And they had these conversations, make commitment. Everybody can do that, but it's going to take our community-based organizations in our neighborhoods that lead that charge. And I would encourage folks to talk about it, and let's go ahead and try to do something like that to make sure we vote in high numbers. And also we have more highly educated voters. That's going to be the key.
Do you think it's a good idea to do these forums virtually, or once we're able to remove the mask and get back into a more social, having these kind of discussions on the language and voting, and it would be a better way to get people involved?
I like the personal contact. Once we get back to that point, there's no question about that. That works much better because that's who we are culturally. We can do the Zoom thing, whatever thing, but if the time is right and safe, nothing like personal contact to certain people. That's just the way it is. When you look people in the eye and you talk to them, they know you, they like you. Even the body language says you if they're listening. So, we need to really get back to that when we can. That is so critical.
I think that it is very important to get back to hand-to-hand discussions, face-to-face discussions. I think that they have a real value, but I would say rather than if we can't get to as many people as we want to personally, I think it's important for us to use every tool that we have in our toolkit. Some people, my kids, my oldest is 28, and I have a 24 and I have a 20. And it makes me very nervous that they get most of their news on their phone. And I understand that they look at their Facebook feeds, and I have had to adjust to the things that they do. My son I was campaigning as I would usually campaign, and my son said, Dad, my friends don't look at that. So let me help you by showing you how to use your phone, showing you how to use Facebook. I think that all of these things working together maximize our opportunity, but I think clearly the best means is face-to-face. When I can look in your face, look in your eyes, shake your hand, know that you're telling me the truth, that's the most important thing to me. But I understand that my millennials get information a different way, and I got to adjust.
Right.
Commissioner, I would very much agree with you 100%, considering I have a soon-to-be 18-year-old new voter this summer in our household. And that is one thing that we've definitely learned in this past year, how it is that we're going to be able to communicate. We've always preferred our trainings to be in person, our volunteer deputy registrar trainings to be in person, but we had to adapt a year ago. We were the first county to do the Zoom trainings, and we're still doing those, but we've also adapted in that we have a way for people to now go to a PowerPoint and then take a test. We have a video that will be launching in 3 weeks that people will be able to do it at home. We will continue to do the virtual trainings, but we do want to get back to face-to-face because we do feel that it has a better impact. But I think what we've learned is we're going to have to incorporate different ways of reaching different individuals, different voters, different communities, and younger people. That is it. The phone is where they get their information. My daughter walks in. Did you hear about what happened, what so-and-so said in DC? And Yes, I did hear about it, and it's one of those things that's how we're going to have to communicate, and that's how we're trying to reach out to young people and everything. So there are a number of different tools we're going to have to continue to utilize.
But if you are going to have meetings and you're going to invite people in, and there's like going to be spaghetti or fried chicken or something, call me. I'll come out.
So food is an option to draw.
Never hurts.
Never hurts. I think overall it has been rather challenging when you look at how we've been able to adjust with communicating work and other means. But I think the person to person, like you said, is a different feel to be in the presence of a body, especially an esteemed body of, like you guys. It's really an honor. But to have the people understand truly where you stand on your positions when it comes down to giving that good, valid information about the how-tos and where to go and where to start looking. So I really appreciate that insight there. Candace, you have another question for our panel?
Yes. If there be no objection, this will be our last question because we want to be mindful of the time. Of course, we have, given the homeless situation in Austin, has there been consideration on ways for the homeless community to vote?
Well, there has been an effort for voter registration to get them registered. We actually do have a committee of individuals that have been very involved with working with different organizations that do service the homeless community in providing applications and assisting them to get registered to vote. So that is one thing that I know that has taken place to assist that community. As far as then assisting them on the other end to actually then go vote. Following that, there are organizations, whether they are faith-based or whether they are assisting with other services, I believe they are also engaged in then doing that follow-through.
I could just add that one of the ways we attempted to reach the homeless was through our mobile voting program for many, many years. We could basically go to them until the legislature figured out that mobile voting was too good. And so they took it away.
Oh, wow.
As it relates to homelessness, we've got homelessness is no one thing. It's a complex set of problems that frankly started getting out of control when the Texas state school system was taken away. And we have got to get to where we can help people in a sustainable way, meaning we've got to make sure that people are getting assessed, that they're getting the treatment that they need, that they're getting into 12 steps programs, and then we're working on housing and job training. All of these things are going to be important, and they have to work together in order to get stable people, to make people stable and get them out of homelessness. Unfortunately, the way the homeless population is handled today, it is that West Austin doesn't want to see them. They're not trying to fix the problem. We have to demand that the things that will actually fix the problem be done. And so this is going to be complex. It's going to take time, but a number of wraparound services need to be made available. Just a place to lay your head is not enough. Mm-hmm. And so it's going to be something that we'll be talking to you all about, and hopefully you'll invite us back and talk about how we can create solutions to problems within our community that often are adversely impacted by public policy. So we want to make sure that we give you the information that we need to address those problems in a real way.
If I can add very quickly to Jeffrey's point about homelessness, the other issue is too, we don't consider the cause of homelessness and where people come from. They come from our neighborhoods. Austin is a very expensive city. We don't address the racial wage gap, displacement. We don't address any of those things. Mm-hmm. If we don't address those things, guess what? This problem is going to continue. So the root cause of this issue is in the economics. We don't seem to understand that. That's why the private sector does a much better job of this population than we do. They have communities of homeless people where they can be decent, get the proper support. get jobs. But in our neighborhoods, we see the displacement, the wage gap, the lack of affordable housing. That's the pool where these people are coming from. So we don't talk about having a city that's equitable to everybody, where we can live here and thrive here. We're not going to ever solve this problem. As you can see, the increase as the increase the cost of living has expanded. It's right there in the numbers. But for some reason, we'll look at the end result and not the cause of the problem. You got to go to the cause, and that takes money, it takes resources, it takes commitment, and it takes leadership.
I totally agree. I think that's a whole nother conversation that I could delve in, because I can get excited about it, but I think about the economic impact, and I'll speak from a personal position of coming here from New Orleans, Louisiana, after a catastrophic event, and seeing how, one, the community was not as embracive, when it came down to the population of people that had to come here or that was placed here, but then how the resources were so sparse in getting the resources for the people that that needed it. Not just housing, like you said, a place to lay your head. It was, how do I reestablish myself in the community? It's through that tenacity that I can say God is good, that I figured out, I wasn't just a private, citizen that worked and moved here or came here. I had to figure out for myself, what is it that I want to do and how do I want to grow if I'm going to stay here? And so it takes a whole, I've always heard it takes a village, but it really does take a lot more of thorough insight to know that dollars and cents make sense when it comes down to helping our community. So we're going to wrap it up. It is 8:10. We have a small audience here. I don't know, people, I had a whole list. I could tell you there's like a big list of people that signed up to join, but for whatever reason weren't able to. And so if any one of our guests have questions for our panelists, we'll give you a couple minutes to ask those questions. We don't want you to feel disconnected by any means. This is a panel of wealth, knowledge, and definitely great insight about what is happening in our political system. So if anyone wants to turn on their mic, have a comment or question, please do so at this time. Don't everybody jump at once.
Juanita, I would like to add, just as as anyone is maybe jumping on with a question, the one thing that is going to come up later this fall is redistricting, which was mentioned earlier, and something that we're going to be dealing with. And it's something that also the community needs to consider looking at getting engaged in that process, as it affects so many of us. I mean, we see Travis County as a pie. We have districts running down to the valley, to Harris County, up to Tarrant County, out West Texas. So we're going to be engaged in that process. The census numbers are going to come to the state in September. So that's going to be taking place, and the lines will be drawn during September, October. And then at some point in time, we'll get the information for Travis County as the Commissioner's Court. Then we'll be looking at any redistricting that the Commissioner's Court will entertain at that time. So we'll be receiving all of that, and we'll know at the end of October what they're going to do with congressional, state Senate, state representatives, school board, state school board, and also judicial seats as well that are district. So there's a lot there.
And then we'll go to court.
Yes.
Well, I mean, and keeping on the lines of the redistricting, I mean, Commissioner Trevelyan, you're in an area that was predominantly populated by minority, Black and brown people. How do you feel about your precinct actually changing its demographics over the last, I would say, 10, 15 years that I've been here? We have our sorority house in East Austin. And when we go to the house, I'm like, I've never seen as many people, in this neighborhood. So how do you feel about that impact for your particular precinct?
Well, we're one of the fastest growing parts of the county. And I think we've been growing at a significant double-digit rate over the last several years. We are the only part of the city, only part of the area that has over 20% African-American population. A lot of the African-American population that moved out of the city moved out further in Precinct 1. So we are growing, but we still are a coalition district, meaning although we have African American representation, we are not a majority of that district. So I have to make sure that I am looking after the interest of all the folks in that area. And what you'll find, what does unite us is that we have a lot of low to moderate income families there. We have a lot of Title I schools there. We try to make sure that as we are moving out further into the county, that our road system is operating properly, that we are paying attention to health and safety issues. We were involved in getting Tesla, for example, to come into the district. It's going to create over 5,000 jobs in phase one. 3,000 of those jobs will be semi-skilled jobs, meaning you don't have to have a college diploma to get them, that they will provide the training for you. We have partnered with ACC and partnered with Tesla to make sure that some of that training is happening and available, and people have access not only to the training, but to childcare and to transportation as well. So we're trying to make sure that we're bringing in opportunity. But in the September, October timeframe, we're going to have a conference on building a Marshall Plan for housing in the area, because now we build a small number of houses that are very expensive. We want to measure the number of houses that will be needed in the entire county and build them in phases so that the costs will be lower, and so that we get the proper types of housing. Multifamily where it's necessary, townhomes where it's preferred, single family in other places. So there are a lot of things that are important in Precinct 1 now, and we just try to make sure that we are bringing experts in, and that we have experts in our organization that can address these types of issues on a continuing basis, and we build a system to address our priority issues. I need the help of the community to define those priorities. What is the most important thing? What resources do we need to put in place to get those things done? So we are listening, we are working together. I talk with Nelson all the time because he's got tremendous insight through the African American quality of life process, but also the work that he's done with the NAACP. We work with the Urban League. We actually work with the city sometimes too. Kazike, and we got him on speed now. But it is important to recognize that we all have to work together. We all have to make sure that decision makers know our priorities, so that we can make sure that we have a voice at every table that has important decisions made about our future.
Thank you so much. If there are no questions, panelists, do you have any last words on what we need to know about our voting rights coming up, and how to prepare ourselves to prepare our community and be more informed about what is happening with this proposition?
I have just one quick note that's considering all the bad news and bad laws that are going to come out of this legislature. I think we ought to all be very carefully watching the For the People Act that's happening up in Congress, because that, if we can get that through, that may be the only thing that saves the damage done by House Bill 6 and Senate Bill 7. So For the People Act, we need to make sure our people get the right support so that they know that this is really important to get it passed.
Thank you so much.
Well, my parents taught me at a very early age that nothing really good comes easy, and the things that are important to our families and to our future are worth fighting for, and that we build and that we build our village, and that we know that we have to work hard, and we know that we have to fight, and we don't do that for ourselves. We do that for those who are going to follow us. Might not know our name, but we laid a foundation for them.
I want to thank you for having this conversation. I've learned so much, and this is how we learn. You got a very unique group here, different kinds of perspective and knowledge. And so these things should be occurring on a regular basis. We meet every month and we have these same conversations. You can ask any kind of question. We can answer it, we can debate it, whatever, but we need to talk more about these issues and make sure that we stay in touch. And I think Dana said it best. Despite all the negative stuff, there is light at the end of the tunnel. There are things that we can do and are doing that folks don't know about. The key is not to give up. The things that we've learned in the past in this country, we all know that we can do better. And just have faith in what we're doing and do the right thing. This is not over. So we have to fight every day to make sure we create and maintain the democracy. You don't just create it and stay it. You got to make sure you maintenance democracy by being informed and being involved. So thank you for your work and thanks for the invitation.
Thank you for accepting. Zeke or Gretchen, any comments?
Thank you.
No comments here, but just a thank you.
Thank you for
sorry.
inviting us. Oh, sorry.
No,
Yeah, no, thank
Gretchen,
you
please
for
go.
inviting us. I'm sorry that Bruce couldn't be here. He was doing a training. That's what he had on his schedule. So he's training down the hall this evening, another group. As I mentioned to Juanita, we already have over 800 VDRs, and they are all ready to start going out into the community and working to get folks registered and everything. So we're very eager to kind of get back into the swing of things. And so we look forward to partnering in the future.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I'll just say thank you for inviting me, and I'm really glad to be part of this panel and be amongst friends talking about what's really important for our community. So thank you, and please reach out anytime.
Sure, appreciate it. Again, I want to thank you all for joining us for this Blue Table Talk. Again, it is always an honor. It's definitely a privilege to have the voices of our community come and share what you all do and contemplate over on a daily basis. There's nothing more humbling than to sit before you, one as the president of this organization, but also as a contributor to the interest of bettering our community and, of course, educating and becoming more engaged in what we do. To my sisters, I thank you all for joining. And my brother, my frat, my husband, he's here, for being on the line as well. And for those that left, again, I know it's late. You probably been on Zoom all day. So again, thank you all for coming. And this has really been a great discussion. And hopefully we could do something like this again. Different subject, different topic, and definitely, I know an hour is not long enough, but I want y'all to eat tonight. So thank you all for coming. Erica, any other comments you have?
Oh, ma'am, just to say good night, and everyone, please stay safe.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Cassandra, Candace. You all are great, always supporting, and I appreciate you all for coming. You all have a good night.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.